I'm Cassandra Mitchell, 34, an event planner who saved every extra penny for 3 years to afford my dream vacation to Greece. When my cousin Rebecca cornered me at our family gathering with that familiar look in her eyes, I should have known what was coming. Her smug expression said it all before she even opened her mouth. "You'll watch my kids on the $5,000 trip you paid for," she smirked so casually, as if she was merely commenting on the weather. My stomach dropped, but a strange calm washed over me. For once, instead of immediately giving in, I decided to let her finish talking. I had no idea that decision would change everything. If you're watching this now, drop a comment telling me where you're viewing from, hit that subscribe button, and stay tuned to see how I finally stood up to the family member who'd been taking advantage of me for years. To understand why Rebecca's request hit me so hard, you need to know a little about our history. I've built my career as an event planner from scratch, working my way up from an assistant position to managing my own clientele. My job involves 60-hour weeks, sometimes handling other people's special moments, while rarely having time for my own. The irony isn't lost on me. I create magical experiences for others, but struggle to prioritize myself. My fascination with Greece started when I was 9 years old. My grandfather would tell me stories of the crystal-clear Mediterranean waters, the ancient ruins that held centuries of history, and the way the white buildings in Santorini glowed pink and gold at sunset. He'd visited as a young man and promised to take me someday, but he passed away before we got the chance. I promised myself I'd make it there, not just for me, but for him too. 3 years ago, I opened a separate savings account labeled Greece Fund and committed to putting away a portion of every paycheck. No matter how tight money got, I wouldn't touch it. I'd pack lunches instead of buying them, skip nights out with friends, and pick up extra clients during what should have been my downtime. My goal was $5,000, enough for a 10-day trip with beautiful accommodations and the freedom to experience everything I dreamed about. My cousin Rebecca and I grew up together only 13 months apart. As children, we were inseparable, but as adults, our relationship became more complicated. Rebecca married young to her high school boyfriend, had 2 kids by 25, and settled into suburban life. I took a different path, focusing on my career and remaining single. Over the years, a pattern emerged in our interactions. Rebecca would routinely borrow my designer dresses for events, returning them stained or stretched. She'd conveniently forget her wallet when we met for lunch, leaving me to cover the bill. She'd call last minute asking me to watch her children because her babysitter canceled, knowing I'd rearrange my schedule to help. I'm a people pleaser by nature, a trait that serves me well professionally but leaves me vulnerable personally. Rebecca recognized this weakness early and exploited it regularly. I'd feel momentarily frustrated but would quickly forgive her, chalking it up to the pressures of motherhood or financial constraints. Our extended family dynamics didn't help. My Aunt Linda, Rebecca's mother, would often say things like, "It's easier for Cassie, she only has herself to worry about," or "Family helps family, that's what we do." These comments reinforced the expectation that my time, money, and resources were less valuable because I didn't have children of my own. Last winter, I finally reached my savings goal. After countless overtime hours and sacrificed weekends, I had $5,000 earmarked for my dream trip. I researched meticulously, reading travel blogs, studying maps, and creating a day-by-day itinerary that would allow me to experience everything on my wish list, from the Acropolis in Athens to the beaches of Mykonos to the sunsets of Santorini. I planned to travel in May, when the weather would be perfect, but the summer crowds hadn't yet arrived. The night I booked my flights and accommodations, I cried happy tears. It felt surreal to finally transform this long-held dream into concrete plans. I called my mom immediately, and her excitement matched my own. "Your grandfather would be so proud," she said, making me tear up all over again. 2 weeks later, our family gathered at my parents' house for my dad's birthday. The atmosphere was warm and festive as everyone caught up over appetizers and drinks. When asked what was new in my life, I couldn't contain my excitement and shared my upcoming travel plans. I finally booked my trip to Greece, I announced, unable to keep the smile from my face. I leave May 15th for 10 days, Athens, Mykonos, and Santorini. Most of my family responded with genuine enthusiasm. My dad raised his glass in a toast, my mom squeezed my hand proudly, and my other cousins asked questions about my itinerary. only Rebecca's reaction seemed off. She smiled and congratulated me, but there was a calculating look in her eyes that should have been my first warning. The evening continued pleasantly as we moved from appetizers to dinner, sharing stories and laughter around my parents' dining table. My dad blew out the candles on his favorite chocolate cake, and as everyone began to disperse into smaller conversation groups, Rebecca approached me with 2 glasses of wine. "Let's catch up," she said, handing me one of the glasses. "It's been ages since we've had a proper talk." We settled in the window seat in my parents' living room, slightly removed from the rest of the family. Rebecca complimented my new haircut and asked about my recent clients before smoothly transitioning to my vacation plans. "Your trip sounds absolutely amazing," she gushed, leaning forward with apparent interest. "You always were the best planner. I bet your itinerary is perfect." "Thanks," I replied, genuinely touched by her enthusiasm. "I've spent months researching everything. I want to make sure I don't miss anything important." "You know," Rebecca said, swirling her wine thoughtfully, "I was just telling Tyler the other day how much I've always wanted to see Greece too." Tyler was Rebecca's boyfriend of 3 months, who she'd started dating shortly after finalizing her divorce from Mark. I'd only met him once briefly at a family lunch. "It's on a lot of people's bucket lists," I agreed, not yet sensing the direction of the conversation. "The kids have been having such a hard time with the divorce." Rebecca continued, her voice dropping sympathetically. "Zach has been acting out at school, and Emma barely talks during visitations with Mark." My heart went out to my niece and nephew. At 8 and 6, they were too young to understand the complexities of their parents' separation. "I've been thinking they need something positive to look forward to," Rebecca said. "A special experience to help them feel secure again." I nodded, still not connecting the dots until Rebecca dropped her bomb. "When I heard about your Greece trip, it hit me what a perfect opportunity. The kids were so excited when I mentioned the possibility. Emma even looked up pictures of the blue domes in Santorini." Rebecca's expression was equal parts hopeful and expectant. The realization of what she was suggesting hit me like a bucket of cold water. She wasn't just making conversation, she was inviting herself and her children to join my carefully planned personal journey. It's not really a kid-friendly itinerary," I stammered, caught completely off guard. "I've planned some pretty intensive historical tours and a lot of hiking." "Oh, the kids are great hikers," Rebecca dismissed my concern with a wave. "And they should see historical sites, it's educational." "Rebecca, I've been planning this as a solo trip." I tried again, my voice gentle but firm. "It's something I've wanted to do by myself for years." Her face fell immediately, her eyes widening with hurt. "I thought you'd be excited to share this with family. The kids need this, Cassie. You know how rough things have been." Guilt washed over me, followed by a familiar sense of obligation. I'd been raised to believe that family comes first, that sacrificing for others was the highest virtue. But this was my dream trip, funded by years of my hard work. "Let me think about it," I conceded, already feeling my resolve weakening. "My accommodations are only booked for 1 person, and I'd need to check if changes are possible." Rebecca's expression brightened instantly. "That's all I'm asking, just consider it. It would mean the world to us." As she rejoined the main group, I sat alone, my excitement about the trip already dimming. That night as I drove home, a sense of dread replaced what had been joyful anticipation just hours before. The next morning, I woke to a flurry of messages in our family group chat. "So excited about our big family trip to Greece. The kids can't wait." Rebecca had not only assumed my tentative, "I'll think about it" meant yes, but had announced it to our entire family. Responses flooded in. "What a generous cousin you have, Rebecca. Cassie, you're an angel for including them. Family vacation, how wonderful." My stomach knotted as I scrolled through the messages. I'd been maneuvered into a corner, publicly positioned as either the generous cousin who would share her special trip or the selfish one who would disappoint children already struggling with their parents' divorce. That night, I barely slept, torn between my desire to stand firm and the pressure to accommodate my family's expectations. By morning, the Greece trip I dreamed about for decades had transformed into something unrecognizable, and it hadn't even begun yet. The following week, my phone chimed constantly with messages from Rebecca. What had started as a simple "can we join you quickly" spiraled into an avalanche of requests, each more presumptuous than the last. "Can we get a hotel with a kids' pool? Zach really needs to swim daily. Emma has gluten sensitivity now. Can you make sure all our restaurants can accommodate? Is there a way to shorten the Athens portion? The kids might get bored with too many ruins. Each message chipped away at my meticulously crafted itinerary, transforming my dream trip into something I no longer recognized. Still, I tried to accommodate researching family-friendly hotels and adjusting my plans to include activities children might enjoy. When Rebecca suggested meeting for coffee to finalize some details, I agreed, hoping we could establish some clear boundaries. We met at a quiet cafe near my apartment on a Saturday morning. I arrived early, spreadsheets and booking information organized in a folder. Rebecca arrived 20 minutes late, offering no apology as she slid into the seat across from me. "Thanks for doing this," she said, pulling out her phone. "I've started a Pinterest board with activities the kids want to do in Greece." I took a deep breath. Before we get into specific activities, we should discuss logistics and budgeting. I've calculated the additional costs for changing my bookings to accommodate 3 more people. Rebecca nodded absently while scrolling through her phone. "About that, I'm a little short this month. The divorce lawyer's final bill was higher than expected." My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. How short is a little short? Rebecca looked up, her expression a practiced mix of embarrassment and expectation. "I can cover the flights if I put them on my credit card, but the accommodations might be tough." "Rebecca, this is a significant expense. We're talking thousands of dollars." She reached across the table and patted my hand. "I know, and I'm so grateful. But you're in such a better financial position than me right now. No kids, no alimony complications, no mortgage." The implication stung that my life choices somehow obligated me to subsidize hers. I'd worked incredibly hard for everything I had, often sacrificing personal time and relationships to build my career. "I can't cover everyone's expenses," I said firmly. "That wasn't part of the original discussion." "I'm not asking for everything," Rebecca backpedaled, sensing my resistance. "Just help with the hotels. And maybe some of the excursions. The kids have their hearts set on a boat tour." Before I could respond, Rebecca's phone buzzed. She glanced down and her face brightened. "Oh, great news. Tyler can come too. He just got his time off approved." The coffee I'd been drinking turned bitter in my mouth. "Tyler is coming now too." "Of course," Rebecca said, as if it were obvious. "We can't leave him behind. Plus, he's great with the kids." What had started as my solo journey had morphed into a family vacation for Rebecca, her children, and now her new boyfriend, all partially funded by me. I felt a familiar tightness in my chest, the same sensation I experienced whenever Rebecca pushed past my boundaries, and I failed to defend them. "I'll need to redo all the calculations," I said weakly, knowing I should be saying much more but finding the words stuck in my throat. "You're the best at this stuff," Rebecca enthused, already returning to her Pinterest board. "Oh, and can we make sure there's a refrigerator in the hotel room? Emma needs her special almond milk." I spent that evening revising my spreadsheets, watching in dismay as the projected costs ballooned. To accommodate Rebecca's family, I would need to upgrade to larger accommodations, adjust transportation arrangements, and modify activity bookings. Even if Rebecca contributed what she claimed she could, I was looking at spending a significant portion of my savings beyond my original budget. The next morning, I called my friend Megan, who had watched this dynamic play out between Rebecca and me for years. "She's doing it again," Megan said flatly after I explained the situation. "Cassie, this is your dream trip. You saved for years. Why are you letting her hijack it?" "They're family," I replied automatically. "The kids are going through a tough time. And that's genuinely sad," Megan acknowledged, "but it doesn't make it your responsibility to provide them with a Greek vacation. There are plenty of ways Rebecca could help her kids through the divorce that don't involve commandeering your special trip." Deep down, I knew Megan was right, but years of family conditioning made it difficult to prioritize my own desires without feeling selfish. I spent the next few weeks in a state of constant anxiety, torn between resentment and obligation. As the trip drew closer and Rebecca's demands continued to multiply, I found myself lying awake at night, no longer excited about the journey, but dreading it instead. The itinerary I'd crafted so carefully had been dismantled and reassembled to accommodate children I would apparently be partially responsible for entertaining. The peaceful moments of reflection at historical sites I'd envisioned were replaced by visions of managing children's boredom and complaints. What hurt most was the realization that Rebecca hadn't once considered what this trip meant to me. Not once had she acknowledged my years of saving or planning. To her, I was simply a convenient resource, a vacation planner, a babysitter, and a financial backer rolled into one. 3 weeks before our departure date, Rebecca insisted on one final planning meeting at my apartment. We need to nail down all the details, she texted. The kids are counting down the days. I agreed, hoping to finally clarify expectations and responsibilities. I'd prepared a detailed agenda covering transportation arrangements, accommodation details, daily itineraries, and most importantly, a clear breakdown of financial obligations. This time, I was determined to stand firm. Rebecca was scheduled to arrive at 2 p.m. At 2:45, my doorbell finally rang. She bustled in with Zach and Emma in tow, offering no apology for her tardiness. "Sorry about bringing the kids," she said, contradicting her lack of apology. "Babysitter canceled last minute. They'll just watch TV while we talk." Before I could respond, Zach had located my remote and was scrolling through streaming services while Emma began exploring my apartment, picking up decorative items from my shelves. "Emma, please be careful with those," I said, gently watching as she handled a delicate ceramic vase my grandfather had brought back from his own travels. "Oh, she's fine," Rebecca dismissed, pulling out her phone. "So I still haven't received the final itinerary from you." I retrieved my laptop and opened the most recent version of our schedule. "That's because you never sent me the completed travel insurance forms I needed. Have you brought them today?" Rebecca waved her hand dismissively. "I thought you could just add us to your policy. It's simpler that way." "That's not how travel insurance works," I explained, feeling the first stirrings of a headache. "Each traveler needs their own coverage." "Fine, I'll look at it later," she said, clearly uninterested. "Let's go through the day-by-day plan instead." As I began reviewing the itinerary, a crash from across the room interrupted us. Emma had knocked over a framed photo, the glass cracking against my hardwood floor. "I'm sorry," Emma whispered, looking genuinely distressed. Before I could reassure her, Rebecca called out, "It's just a frame, honey. Aunt Cassie doesn't mind." I bit my tongue, reminding myself that Emma wasn't the problem here. I cleaned up the glass while Rebecca continued scanning the itinerary on my laptop, making occasional sounds of disapproval. 3 hours at the Acropolis. That's way too long for the kids, she remarked. "And what's this cooking class? Zach won't eat Greek food." "I've already modified the itinerary significantly," I said, returning to the table. "The cooking class was one of the experiences I was most looking forward to." "Well, you can still do it," Rebecca said, reaching for her water bottle. "That can be one of the afternoons when you watch the kids, while Tyler and I explore on our own." The casual statement landed like a bomb. "What do you mean when I watch the kids?" Rebecca looked up, seemingly surprised by my confusion. "We'll need some adult time, obviously. Tyler and I were thinking every other afternoon would be good. Plus, he really wants to do that sunset sailing trip that's adults only." I stared at her speechless as she continued browsing the itinerary and making notes. "This works out perfectly," she continued, oblivious to my shock. "The days you have those long historical tours scheduled, Tyler and I can have our alone time. There's a couple's massage at this resort in Santorini that looks amazing." The realization hit me with stunning clarity. Rebecca had never intended this to be a shared family experience. She had planned all along to use me as a free babysitter on a vacation I had paid for, allowing her and her boyfriend to enjoy a romantic Greek getaway while I entertained her children. As this understanding dawned, Rebecca delivered the line that would finally break my people-pleasing pattern for good. Looking up with a self-satisfied smirk, she said, "You'll watch my kids on the $5,000 trip you paid for. It's perfect. You get quality time with Zach and Emma, and we get a vacation. Everyone wins." Something shifted inside me at that moment. Instead of immediately protesting or acquiescing, I did something different. I let her finish talking. I watched as she outlined her expectations in excruciating detail. The mornings I'd be responsible for getting her children breakfast while she slept in the museum visits she'd skip because they were too boring. The romantic dinners she and Tyler would enjoy while I ordered room service with the kids. With each word, my resolve strengthened. I observed her with an almost clinical detachment, recognizing the manipulation tactics that had worked on me for years. The assumption of agreement, the framing of her desires as beneficial to everyone, the subtle implications that refusal would make me selfish or uncaring. Rebecca finally looked up from her planning, noticing my silence. "What?" she asked, a hint of defensiveness creeping into her voice. "Could you repeat what you just said?" I asked quietly. "About the childcare arrangements." Rebecca shrugged. "Just that you'll watch the kids while Tyler and I have some alone time. It makes sense you love them, and you're so good with them. Plus, you're used to being alone, so it's not like you'd be missing out on anything. The clear dismissal of my experience, the implication that my time and enjoyment were inherently less valuable than hers, crystallized everything that had been wrong in our relationship for years. Say it one more time, I said, my voice calm but firm. I want to be very clear about what you're asking. Rebecca shifted uncomfortably, perhaps finally sensing the change in my demeanor. But rather than backtrack, she doubled down. I'm just saying, you'll watch my kids during parts of this trip you planned and paid for, she restated, a defensive edge to her voice. I don't see why that's a problem. It's not like you have anyone special to spend time with there. And with those words, the last thread of my hesitation snapped. No, I said, the single word hanging between us with surprising power. Rebecca blinked, clearly caught off guard. No, what? No, I will not be watching your children on this trip. No, I will not be subsidizing a romantic vacation for you and Tyler. No, I will not continue to let you take advantage of my generosity. My voice remained level, but there was a new firmness to it that I barely recognized. Rebecca's expression cycled rapidly through confusion, disbelief, and the beginnings of indignation. You can't be serious. The kids are already excited. We've been planning this for weeks. You've been planning it, I corrected. I've been trying to accommodate an ever-growing list of demands that have completely transformed my dream trip into something I no longer recognize or want. So you're just being selfish, Rebecca's voice rose slightly. Zach looked up from the television, sensing the tension. It's not selfish to want the vacation I saved for 3 years to have, I explained calmly. What's selfish is assuming that my time, money, and plans are less important than yours, simply because I don't have children. Rebecca's face flushed. I knew it, you're jealous because I have a family and you don't. The accusation might have wounded me in the past, might have made me backpedal and apologize. But in that moment, it only confirmed that I was making the right decision. This isn't about jealousy, Rebecca. It's about respect. You didn't ask to join my trip. You announced it. You didn't offer to cover your fair share. You assumed I would help. You didn't consider what this trip meant to me. You only thought about what you could get out of it. Rebecca stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Fine. If you don't want us to come, just say so. I don't want you to come, I stated simply. Not under these circumstances. Her eyes widened as if she hadn't actually expected me to say it. You know what this will do to the family, right? How it will look when everyone finds out you uninvited my children? The threat was clear. Rebecca would make me the villain. In this story, would use our family's dynamics against me. But surprisingly, I found I no longer cared as much as I thought I would. If you'd like to discuss this with the family, I'm happy to do so. In fact, let's call my mom right now and explain the situation exactly as it stands. I'll tell her how you expected me to act as your unpaid childcare while you and your boyfriend enjoyed a romantic vacation on my dime. Rebecca paled slightly. She knew how it would sound when framed accurately. You're twisting things, she accused weakly. I raised an eyebrow. Let's call her. This is ridiculous, Rebecca snapped, gathering her purse. Come on, kids, we're leaving. Emma, Zach, it's been lovely seeing you, I said sincerely to my niece and nephew. I hope we can spend some time together when I get back from Greece. As Rebecca herded her children toward the door, she turned for one parting shot. You'll regret this. Nobody likes a selfish person, Cassie. The door slammed behind them, and I sank onto my couch, my heart racing. I'd finally stood up to Rebecca after years of accommodation, and while it felt terrifying, there was also an undeniable sense of relief washing through me. As predicted, my phone began lighting up within the hour. Text messages from Rebecca alternated between guilt-inducing, the kids are crying, and threatening. Everyone will know what you did. Calls came in from various family members, clearly having heard Rebecca's version of events. I let most go to voicemail, needing time to process my own emotions before defending my decision to others. The one call I did take was from my mother. Rebecca says there's been some misunderstanding about the Greece trip, she began cautiously. Taking a deep breath, I explained everything: the gradual takeover of my trip, the financial expectations, and finally, Rebecca's plan to use me as a babysitter while she and Tyler enjoyed a romantic getaway. There was silence on the line when I finished. Then, to my surprise, my mother sighed deeply. Oh, Cassie, "I'm so sorry you've been put in this position." "You're not disappointed in me?" I asked, vulnerability creeping into my voice. "For what's standing up for yourself, honey? I love Rebecca, but she's been taking advantage of your kindness for years. Your father and I have discussed it many times." The validation brought tears to my eyes. "I was afraid everyone would side with her." "Some might," my mother admitted, "but that doesn't make you wrong." Later that evening, I received an unexpected call from Uncle Frank, Rebecca's father. I answered hesitantly, bracing for recrimination. "Cassandra," he began formally, "I want to apologize for my daughter's behavior." I nearly dropped the phone in shock. "Rebecca has always had a sense of entitlement that her mother and I failed to correct," he continued. "This isn't the first time she's taken advantage of someone's generosity, but it should be the last. I've made that clear to her." The following week brought a family dinner that Rebecca pointedly refused to attend. I arrived nervous but resolved prepared to defend my decision. To my surprise, most of my family members were supportive or at least understanding. A few of my aunts made comments about family, helping family, but even they became quiet when Uncle Frank pointedly asked if they'd be willing to fund a vacation for Rebecca themselves. The most revelatory moment came when my cousin Jennifer pulled me aside and whispered, "Thank you for finally saying no to her. She tried the same thing with our cabin rental last summer." It dawned on me that Rebecca had been playing this game with multiple family members, and my refusal had opened the door for others to share similar experiences. What I'd feared would isolate me from my family had instead created new connections based on honesty rather than obligation. Rebecca's attempts to turn the family against me largely failed, which only intensified her anger. She began posting passive-aggressive social media updates about discovering who your true friends are and the importance of family loyalty. Few engaged with these transparent attempts at garnering sympathy. The weeks leading up to my departure were emotionally taxing, but ultimately strengthening. Each time I reinforced my boundaries, it became easier to do so again. By the time I boarded my flight to Athens, I felt a newfound confidence, not just in my travel plans, but in my ability to advocate for myself in all areas of my life. Despite the resolution with my family, anxiety followed me onto the plane. Had I been too harsh, would this permanently damage my relationship with Rebecca? Was I truly being selfish? These questions circled in my mind as the aircraft lifted off American soil. I'd invited Megan to join me on the trip, splitting costs fairly between us. Having weathered the Rebecca storm alongside me, she was the perfect companion, respectful of my original vision, while bringing her own enthusiasm to our adventures. "Stop overthinking," Megan said as we settled into our seats. "You did the right thing. Now it's time to enjoy what you've worked so hard for." Somewhere over the Atlantic, I felt the burden of guilt beginning to lift. By the time we landed in Athens, breathing in the warm Mediterranean air, I found myself fully present for perhaps the first time in months. Our first day, we visited the Acropolis, climbing the ancient steps, just as my grandfather had described. Standing before the Parthenon, I felt a profound connection to both the history around me and to my grandfather's memory. This exact moment, was what I had saved and planned for. "We would have missed this," Megan observed quietly, noting the tears in my eyes as I took in the panoramic view of Athens. "If Rebecca had come, you'd be managing kids' complaints about the heat right now instead of having this moment." She was right. The trip I was experiencing was precisely the one I had dreamed of. We spent hours in museums that would have bored children to tears. We took a cooking class where I learned to make my grandfather's favorite spanakopita. We hiked to remote viewpoints that wouldn't have been accessible with kids in tow. In Mykonos, we met a group of local fishermen who invited us onto their boat for an impromptu tour of hidden coves not listed in any guidebook. In Santorini, we joined an archaeological tour led by a passionate professor who shared theories and historical details far beyond what would appear in standard tourist information. Each day brought experiences that simply wouldn't have been possible had I acquiesced to Rebecca's plan. More importantly, I found myself relaxing into a version of myself I hardly recognized, confident, assertive, unburdened by the constant need to accommodate others at my own expense. One evening, sitting at a small taverna as the sun set over the Aegean Sea, I posted a photo to social media with the simple caption, "Dream realized." Within minutes, supportive comments poured in from family members and friends, each celebrating this moment with me from afar. Rebecca, of course, couldn't resist commenting. "Must be nice to vacation alone while family struggles." I deleted her comment without responding and continued enjoying my meal. You wouldn't have done that before, Megan noted, observing my small act of boundary setting. She was right again. The old Cassie would have agonized over Rebecca's words, might even have cut the evening short to compose a placating response. The new Cassie simply refused to let someone else's bitterness taint a perfect moment. The days in Greece passed in a blend of planned activities and spontaneous discoveries. I collected memories like precious stones, the taste of fresh figs purchased from a roadside stand, conversations in broken English with elderly villagers who shared family recipes, the cool marble of ancient columns beneath my fingertips, particular quality of light that made even ordinary scenes look like paintings. Perhaps the most meaningful moment came in a tiny village outside Athens, where my grandfather had traced his own ancestry. I hadn't included this on my original itinerary, feeling it might be too difficult emotionally, but now I found myself drawn to make the connection. The village was small, just a cluster of whitewashed buildings surrounding a central square. An elderly man at the local cafe recognized my grandfather's surname immediately. Michalakis, he said, his face lighting up. There are still Michalakis cousins here. Through a combination of his limited English and my phrasebook Greek, I learned that distant relatives of mine still maintained an olive grove just outside the village. When I visited, they welcomed me with immediate warmth, showing me faded photographs that included faces strikingly similar to my grandfather's. You honor us by coming, the matriarch of the family said, through a younger relative who translated. Your grandfather's spirit returns through your eyes. Standing in that grove, surrounded by trees that had witnessed generations of my family's history, I felt a sense of completion that transcended even my most ambitious travel dreams. This connection wouldn't have been possible in the chaotic family trip Rebecca had envisioned. As our time in Greece drew to a close, I realized I'd experienced something beyond a vacation. I'd undergone a transformation, reclaiming not just my dream trip, but also my agency in all my relationships. Returning to reality after such a profound experience proved challenging in unexpected ways. My apartment, once a comfortable sanctuary, now felt confining after the expansive Aegean horizons. More significantly, I returned with a new perspective on my relationships, particularly the patterns I'd established with family members. The first family gathering after my return was my grandmother's birthday celebration. Rebecca had chosen to attend, breaking her pattern of avoiding events where I would be present. I felt a flutter of anxiety as I arrived, unsure of what reception awaited me. My Aunt Linda greeted me with a slightly stiff hug. "Rebecca's here," she warned in a low voice. "Try to keep things civil for your grandmother's sake." "I have no intention of creating drama," I assured her, setting down the gift I'd brought, a handcrafted ceramic plate from a Santorini artist. Most family members asked enthusiastic questions about my trip, genuinely interested in my experiences. I shared stories and photos, careful to frame my responses in terms of personal fulfillment rather than implied criticism of Rebecca's plan. Rebecca remained noticeably silent during these conversations, positioning herself at the opposite end of the room with a carefully maintained expression of indifference. The tension was palpable but contained both of us performing civility for the sake of the celebration. It was my Aunt Clara, Linda's sister, and something of a family truth-teller, who finally addressed the elephant in the room. Finding me alone in the kitchen, she closed the door and spoke frankly. "I wanted you to know that most of us think you did the right thing," she said, without preamble. Rebecca's behavior was out of line. "Thank you," I replied, genuinely touched by her support. It wasn't an easy decision. "Rebecca's always been enabled," Clara continued. "Linda and Frank gave her everything, never made her work for anything or face consequences. The divorce hit her hard financially because she's never learned to manage money." This information added context to Rebecca's behavior, but didn't excuse it. "I understand she's struggling, but that doesn't make it your responsibility," Clara finished firmly. "Did you know she booked a trip to Virginia Beach the same week you were in Greece? Posted plenty of photos with Tyler on a romantic getaway while complaining to everyone who would listen about how you abandoned her." The revelation shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. While portraying herself as wounded and deprived, Rebecca had simply found another way to get what she wanted. "The kids stayed with Frank and Linda," Clara added. Rebecca claimed they needed grandparent time while she processed her emotions about your betrayal. I shook my head, marveling at Rebecca's capacity for self-justification. "I never meant to hurt the children." "They're fine," Clara assured me. In fact, they probably had a better time with their grandparents than they would have being dragged around Greece. When I rejoined the main gathering, I noticed subtle changes in the family dynamic. People who had previously deferred to Rebecca's demands now seemed less accommodating. When she complained about the cake flavor, no one rushed to appease her. When she mentioned needing help moving furniture, the following weekend offers were noticeably sparse. It dawned on me that my stand had created ripple effects beyond my own relationship with Rebecca. Others had found permission to establish their own boundaries as well. The confrontation I'd been dreading finally occurred at Thanksgiving. The holiday had always been a significant event in our family, with everyone gathering at my parents' home for an extended celebration. Rebecca arrived late, making a theatrical entrance that demanded attention. Throughout dinner, she made pointed remarks that skirted the edge of direct confrontation. Some people put family first, while others prioritize their own pleasure, and true loyalty is tested during difficult times. I maintained my composure, refusing to engage with these provocations. After dinner, however, as I helped clean up in the kitchen, Rebecca cornered me. "You've turned everyone against me," she accused, her voice low but intense. "Are you happy now?" "That was never my intention," I replied calmly. "I simply set a boundary. You humiliated me." Her voice rose slightly before she caught herself glancing toward the dining room, where others might hear. "You made me look like a bad person." "Rebecca," I said, setting down the dish I'd been drying, "I didn't make you look like anything. Your own actions and expectations did that." Her eyes filled with tears, whether genuine or strategic, I couldn't tell. "You have no idea what it's like being a single mother struggling to give my kids experiences while you jet off to Greece without a care." For a moment, I felt the familiar pull of guilt. Then I remembered the Virginia Beach trip Clara had mentioned. "Is that why you took a romantic vacation with Tyler?" while claiming to everyone that you couldn't afford to take your kids anywhere. Rebecca's expression flickered with surprise before hardening. "That was different. I needed that time for my mental health, and I needed my trip for the same reason I countered. The difference is that I didn't expect anyone else to pay for it or watch my children while I enjoyed it." Our conversation might have escalated further had my father not entered the kitchen, then his expression, making it clear he'd overheard enough to understand the situation. "Rebecca," he said quietly, "I think it's time we all had an honest conversation about expectations in this family." What followed was difficult but necessary. In the living room, with most of the adult family members present, years of enabling behavior and unreasonable expectations were finally addressed openly. Rebecca cried, accused, defended, and eventually, when none of these tactics worked, fell silent. "We love you," Uncle Frank told his daughter, his voice gentle but firm. "But the pattern stops here. You're an adult with responsibilities, not a child who can demand that others accommodate your wants." As painful as this intervention was, it marked a turning point. Rebecca left early, refusing offers to drive her home, but the air felt clearer in her absence, as if a storm had finally broken, allowing everyone to breathe more freely. In the weeks that followed, Rebecca maintained a cool distance from the family. Her social media became a showcase of new beginnings, and toxic people removal transparent attempts to reframe her experience as one of empowerment rather than accountability. Then, unexpectedly, she reached out to me directly. The message was brief. "Can we talk? Just us." We met at a neutral location, a cafe equidistant from our homes. Rebecca arrived on time, a small change that didn't escape my notice. "I've been doing some thinking," she began after our coffees arrived. "And some therapy," she added with a self-deprecating smile that reminded me of the cousin I'd grown up loving. "That's great," I said sincerely. "I'm not good at admitting when I'm wrong," she continued, staring into her cup. "And I was wrong about the trip. About a lot of things, actually." The admission clearly cost her, and I felt a surge of compassion mixed with caution. "Thank you for saying that. I've taken advantage of your kindness for years," Rebecca continued. "It was so easy because you never complained, and I told myself you didn't mind, or that you owed me somehow because your life was easier." I nodded, allowing her to continue without interruption. "I'm jealous of you sometimes," she admitted, finally meeting my eyes. "Your freedom, your success, the way you've built your life exactly as you wanted it. I made different choices, and while I love my kids more than anything, sometimes I resent the sacrifices motherhood requires." This vulnerability was new, and I recognized the courage it required. "That makes sense," I acknowledged. "All choices involve trade-offs." "I shouldn't have tried to hijack your trip," Rebecca concluded. and I'm sorry for how I behaved afterward. I appreciate that I said simply, neither rushing to absolve her nor dwelling on the hurt. Where do we go from here? Rebecca smiled tentatively. Maybe we start fresh, with clear boundaries and better communication. It wasn't an immediate fix, and trust would take time to rebuild, but it was a beginning. As we parted, Rebecca hugged me briefly, an authentic gesture free from manipulation. Your trip looked amazing, by the way, she said. Maybe someday you can help me plan one that I pay for myself. I'd like that I replied and found that I genuinely meant it. 1 year after the confrontation, that changed everything. I sat on my balcony reflecting on the journey, not just my trip to Greece, but the emotional voyage that had transformed my relationships and sense of self. The ceramic plate I'd brought back from Santorini caught the morning light, its blue glaze reminiscent of the Mediterranean waters that had witnessed my rebirth. The months following my boundary setting with Rebecca had brought challenges, but also unexpected gifts. Initially, there had been awkwardness at family gatherings, sideways glances, and whispered conversations that stopped when I approached. Some relatives, particularly those of my parents' generation, who valued keeping the peace above all else, struggled to adapt to the new dynamic. Gradually, though, a healthier pattern emerged. My relationship with Rebecca evolved into something more balanced and honest. We didn't become best friends overnight, but our interactions gained an authenticity they had previously lacked. She no longer called with last-minute childcare emergencies or convenient forgotten wallets at restaurants. When she did ask for help, it came with genuine appreciation rather than entitled expectation. More surprisingly, my relationships with other family members deepened. Uncle Frank and I developed a close bond, meeting monthly for coffee and conversations about everything from politics to philosophy. My cousin Jennifer and I discovered shared interests in hiking and photography, planning weekend excursions that strengthened our connection. Even my mother changed, becoming more assertive in her own relationships. Watching you stand up for yourself gave me permission to do the same, she confided one evening. I've spent too many years accommodating others at my own expense. The professional impact was equally significant. I approached client negotiations with newfound confidence, clearly articulating my boundaries around time, scope, and compensation. Rather than driving clients away, as I'd feared, this clarity actually attracted higher quality projects and more respectful professional relationships. The most profound change, however, was internal. The constant background anxiety that had accompanied my people-pleasing tendencies diminished significantly. I slept better, laughed more freely, and found joy in simple pleasures that I'd previously been too stressed to appreciate. I wasn't perfect, of course. There were still moments when I caught myself automatically agreeing to unreasonable requests or taking on responsibilities that weren't mine. The difference was that I now recognized these patterns quickly and could course-correct before resentment built. Rebecca's journey paralleled my own in unexpected ways. The family intervention had initially sent her retreating into defensive isolation, but eventually prompted genuine introspection. She began seeing a therapist, regularly examining the roots of her entitled behavior, and working to develop healthier patterns. I never realized how much I was compensating for my own insecurities by controlling and using others, she shared during one of our now monthly lunch dates. It's hard facing that part of myself. Her relationship with her children improved as she took more responsibility for their emotional well-being, rather than using them as pawns or excuses. She even ended things with Tyler, recognizing that the relationship had been based more on convenience and financial support than genuine connection. In a moment of particular growth, Rebecca organized a modest but meaningful birthday celebration for Zach entirely on her own, planning, funding, and executing it without demanding assistance from family members. The pride on her face when everyone complimented her efforts spoke volumes about her evolving self-sufficiency. As for me, I'd begun planning my next dream trip, a photography tour of Japan's rural villages. This time, I approached the planning process differently, clearly communicating my intentions from the start and feeling no obligation to include anyone who didn't align with my vision for the experience. When Rebecca expressed interest in hearing about my plans, I shared them openly but without the underlying anxiety that she might try to insert herself. To my pleasant surprise, she simply wished me well and asked if I might bring back a small souvenir for Emma, who was developing an interest in Japanese culture. The lessons I'd learned through this experience were too valuable not to share. I began writing about boundaries and self-advocacy on a small blog initially intended just as a personal outlet. To my surprise, the posts resonated with readers, many of whom shared similar struggles with family dynamics and people-pleasing tendencies. Your story helped me find the courage to tell my brother he couldn't live on my couch temporarily for the 4th time this year, one reader commented. Another wrote, I finally canceled plans with a friend who always makes me feel drained instead of making up an excuse like I usually do. These connections reminded me that my experience wasn't unique, that many people struggled with the balance between kindness and self-respect, between family obligation and personal boundaries. The Greece trip, which had once seemed like the culmination of a dream, had actually been just the beginning of a much more significant journey. The $5,000 I'd saved had purchased not just a vacation, but a transformation, a new understanding of my worth, and a toolkit for maintaining healthy relationships moving forward. Standing up to Rebecca had been difficult, even painful at times, but I couldn't regret it. By allowing her to finish that entitled statement, you'll watch my kids on the $5,000 trip you paid for and then calmly refusing to accept it, I'd change the course of our relationship and my life. Some family dynamics take years or even generations to shift, and I didn't expect perfection. There would still be holiday tensions, misunderstandings, and moments when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. The difference was that now I had the awareness to recognize these patterns and the courage to address them directly. As the sun set on my balcony, casting long shadows across the ceramic plate from Santorini, I felt a deep sense of peace. The journey hadn't ended. It would continue throughout my life as I practiced and refined these skills of boundary setting and self-advocacy. But I had taken the crucial first steps, and each day brought new opportunities to strengthen this healthier way of being. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who took advantage of your generosity? How did you find the courage to stand up for yourself, and what changed in your relationships afterward? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might give someone else the strength they need to make a similar stand. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more personal growth stories and hit the notification bell to join our community of boundary-setting warriors. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your dreams and boundaries deserve protection, no matter what anyone else might say.